Pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we are going to start off with our attendance. Dave, do you have any questions on attendance?
We do not.
Okay, then we're going to move on to agenda approval. Is there any additions, corrections to the board agenda?
Additions and corrections. First one on the consent agenda with the minutes, and it said our meeting last month was at the high school when it was in Hinckley-Finlayson, so that's been changed. We had a new resignation that came in today, which is in your electronic copy. Keep going. I had one name wrong in the board, who's coming to the board meetings and reports, so I've changed that. I still had Sarah Severson's name from last year, so I changed that to Bruce Beckman, or Sarah Beckridge. I had in there and I changed it to Bruce Beckman. If I keep going with the changes, I added, today I was able to get some comparisons on school board compensation, so I added that in just so you could see some averages. In the student discipline policy, which is just a first read, but in there it says that we have Saturday school. We don't have Saturday school, so I crossed that off. That was a MSBA model language. We don't have Saturday policy, or Saturday school, so I just took that off. And then last Friday, I had updated, we had received from our attorneys the draft of a staff social media policy, so I added that Friday afternoon. I think that was all.
All right, so we have an agenda. Is there a motion to approve our agenda?
I'll make the motion.
A second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on what's been presented for changes or additions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next up is open forum. Rules for open forum. There are 3 minutes per speaker. Open forum shall not take more than a total of 15 minutes. No complaints about individual staff members, about students, or about other persons are permitted. All presenters will conduct their business in a manner that meets community standards for decorum. The board will not take action on items presented in open forum. Did anybody sign up?
Nope.
Does anybody wish to speak? Okay. Then we will move on to our insurance presentation. Gabe is here.
Sorry, Gabe, I hope I didn't tell you we were in Finlayson. If I did, I
You did not, no. Thank you all for giving me the opportunity to discuss as we have in the past regarding status of insurance. Up on the board, there is a proposal for the insurance. Status of industry kind of continues to linger as we've seen last year. Property line in particular has been extremely difficult when it comes to property insurance, buildings, business, personal property. You've probably seen that on your homeowners as well. It's filtering into the personal lines too. We've seen this with auto and some of the other lines. We'll talk about that in a few minutes, but it continues to be challenging for the property line. Regarding what we have done at Town and Country, we've kind of thrown out the net to all the carriers that would see fit for eligibility with school districts. And many of them just don't have an appetite for school districts within the state of Minnesota. The ones that did, we explored. Some were declined, some declined to quote, and a few did. EMC as well as Liberty Mutual are the two carriers in particular to property that were receptive to quoting. So we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Specifically with the district, the work comp was good. Our experience mod was at a 1.00, which is flat when we consider experience mod. When we go to a 1.01, it's a debit. Would we want to see a credit or a flat? Oh, absolutely. But a 1.01 is really good when you consider the other districts across the state of Minnesota. So when we look at that, I consider that flat. I consider that an excellent an excellent thing. And the mod is, again, I think we chatted about it pretty much every time we spoke. That's directly attributed to the claims history, frequency, and the volatility of the claim amount per claim. So I think regarding the claims history, regarding what the district is doing with safety meetings, quarterly review meetings with Superintendent Masterson, the drills that they're doing, facility-wide inspect was done by EMC. Brian, was that about a month and a half ago?
Yep.
Somewhere around there. To continue to partner with the school district to make sure that we have the safest amenities possible for our community. And then Scott George with the Resource and Training Solutions continues to be a vocal point within the district, which is nice. One of the premiums, and I know this might be a question as of late, our linebacker coverage. I think you all know, I won't go into particulars with this, but there's probably concerns regarding the linebacker coverage, specifically the premium, and if there would be anything done with EMC. The premium did go up, but the premium went up for everyone across the state of Minnesota. They took hits considerably with claims. This continues to be a frequency within not just school districts, but nationwide. We're starting to see just civil suits, or suits themselves, not civil suits, but suits against organizations, directors, and officers, whether it be a wrongful termination suit, harassment suit, anything like that, that usually falls into a similar situation of a linebacker. So we're seeing this across the nation. We're seeing staggering numbers continue to rise on this. And keep in mind, it doesn't mean that the organization truly across wherever the situation is at fault. It's lawyer fees. I mean, you guys have to activate the claim in order for the litigation or your lawyers to step in and represent whoever the organization is. So that costs money, and it can be a lot of money. So I wouldn't fret when we see these numbers to think anything was directly involved with our district, and have everything to do with more lines of what's going on nationwide and just they call it social inflation. It's lawyers, it's litigation costs that are getting very, very expensive. I think you see on many news channels these extreme lawsuit payouts. A lot of that has to do with directors and officers E&O coverage through cities and whatever organizations. So that continues to be an issue when it comes to litigation and organizations. Getting back to the property, speaking with Superintendent Masterson and Joanne Bruns, we were leaning more in the direction of staying with EMC in particular. And the reason being is we've seen some deductibles, and a few of the coverages have changed, and to the dramatic, if you will. When you see the deductibles, I will start with Liberty Mutual first. This was a contender of EMC. One of the issues, or one of the things that we looked at with wind hail in particular, they're offering a 1% wind hail deductible. When you look at that and you look at I call it the big three in our district. We got the elementary schools and we have the high school. Those are the big three, the biggest structures. So when you have a wind hail claim, and keep in mind, these roofs are rock parapet, they're rubber. When it comes to a wind hail loss, they're quite durable. However, wind hail, we've seen it before, prior damages, could be windows, it could be different metal trim, fascia, whatever it may be, that could cause damage within the big three. The reason why I bring up these big three is the 1% deductible itself. When I consider the high school, our deductible is like $566,000 with that 1%. When we consider the Finlayson Elementary School, it's $109,000 deductible. So in the elementary school, I think it was $250, somewhere around there, $250,000 deductible. So that in itself was a turnoff. One of the coverages that with Liberty Mutual, they would not quote replacement costs. Its actual cash value applies to all roofs among our districts. So we consider all 13 locations. There are some locations that have multiple buildings. They will not pay replacement costs. They will depreciate the value of that roof if there is a loss. Comparable to EMC, the flat deductible is $25,000. The wind hail for the high school is 75,000. So the elementary schools are 25,000 flat wind hail. I will mention with Liberty Mutual, the flat deductible, that's not wind hail, is 10,000 with that. Water damage is 50. We just felt that EMC was a safer bet when it came to the wind hail, given the fact that we were seeing that these storms the storm action the last 3 years have been considerable. And property in the open is $5,000. The one thing I'll note with EMC is they do have actual cash value for roofs that are 15 years or older. So when it comes to some of these older structures, they will do ACV. So the other note there, and I am in the process of wrapping that up with the church. We will have a quote with that probably the end of this week with respect to the property coverage. I don't know where the board sits with this. I talked with Masterson. It's a property itself that we need to probably insure, but not to the full limit of replacement costs or actual cash value, but maybe some sort of a small limit. Liability does extend with EMC over to that property. So if there were to be anybody of a third party walk on that premise and get hurt, whether it's bodily injury or property damage, there is coverage for that aspect. But that in itself, I've been working a number of months with trying to find the right particular carrier. I do estimate finding property would be around $1,200 to $1,500 for property coverage for that application itself. Yeah, I guess that's it to the final bottom line there. You can see the differences when it comes to the proposal. So you see the increase when I see EMC, the renewal itself is up roughly 20%. When we see, I thought that was quite interesting. When we see a lot of our personal lines carriers and our commercial lines carriers, it's unfortunately, it's par for the course right now. We're seeing a lot between 20 and 40% increases when it comes to it. So that 20% is all these lines kind of sandwiched together, showing a 20% increase. Liberty Mutual self paired with SFM with work comp. They're showing somewhat pretty much flat regarding the current term with EMC. However, the deductibles themselves are one thing that had us a little concerned about if we were to make a switch in that direction. There's a few other things too that have me concerned with Liberty Mutual as well. They're getting close. We've been quoting them almost every year, and they're getting more and more competitive. These deductibles are a little aggressive in my opinion. Are there any questions?
The deductible for Liberty Mutual, that's the only option is 1%. They don't have.
I did ask them if there was any wiggle room, and they were quite firm with that. They would not move.
Gabe, how much did the insurance company pay to the school total over last year with all the vehicles, all the windows and stuff like that? They paid a lot, didn't they?
It wasn't a tremendous amount. I could run those numbers and give it to Superintendent Masterson, so he can let you all know what it was.
Okay.
When you talked last year, Leo, do you mean this current term that we're wrapping up here?
Yes,
Okay.
because didn't we have a few vehicles and?
We did. We had a deer hit. We had the glass claims. I felt the glass claims were down this year compared to last year. I don't know as far as we had such a mild winter if that had anything to do with it, but they were down considerably.
We had the Brennan Field. We
had Brendan Field, we had the elementary school, and I cannot remember if the boards at the boiler in the high school here were part of this year or the year
I
before.
think that was the year before, but we had some air exchange go here at the high school.
Okay.
Not supposed to air exchange,
Okay.
but something with our air conditioning went above the science classroom.
So I can run those, I can pull those numbers and certainly provide those
And lawsuit, was that this year or a year ago?
this year.
That was this year, okay.
Yeah, so the one that's sitting out there right now is still open. And you guys probably know more than I during this point in time. So that one will remain open until you'll see if they're able to shut it down. So
Thanks, Gabe.
you're welcome.
What's the difference between the linebacker and the umbrella?
So the linebacker is directors and officers, staff in general. So the linebacker doesn't necessarily go under the umbrella, but it's basically professional liability. So if there's decisions made by a board or a committee and somebody in the community doesn't feel that it's appropriate, they may.
And that's different than the umbrella, because the umbrella is just for,
Yeah, umbrella will go over top of many facets, general liability, your auto liability. So if those liability limits are exhausted on a claim, the umbrella can then activate if need be.
thank you.
So how does the EMC compare with, Liberty in terms of the linebacker coverage and the umbrella? Is it the same coverage?
I didn't go through all of the policy form. It was very similar. There's a few caveats that are a bit different in the forms themselves. But as I kind of go through the important pieces, for example, EMC you have to endorse regarding counselors. That has to be endorsement. It's already built into Liberty. There's just small pieces like that are built in. So the coverages themselves, the forms are very close when it comes to that nature. And when you look at some of the other ones, like the linebacker itself, a lot of times these bigger companies will contract out to another company to hold that linebacker coverage, and many of them from the same company anyway. They're just offering a better rate if they choose to. So to answer your question, many of them are very, very close. One difference is that the commercial general liability, you actually have to endorse with Liberty Mutual for if there's a safety resource officer. If the board chooses to bring them back with the regulations, it sounds like this probably will happen. We have to endorse with Liberty Mutual. I think it's about $760, which is added. I did include that term. So if there were to be a lawsuit because of an SRO, they may throw the district into a lawsuit that then gives us coverage for any litigation. So different caveats to different companies, but yeah, in a sense, very close.
So the coverage for a lawsuit would be the same under EMC or Liberty, pretty close, you say?
Yep.
So if you look at it as a whole, Gabe, work comp, property, auto, everything, we're looking at just under 20%. Is that correct?
It's, yeah, right around 20%.
And you would recommend just going with EMC then?
Yeah, I would say, to be completely honest, if the deductibles were a little bit softer with Liberty Mutual, honestly, I would be receptive to moving and advising that we look to make a change. But I get quite nervous when I see these deductibles that volatile with a wind hail. We just had one June 12th that ran through Ascove, and that hail was something I've never seen before. As jagged and sharp as they were basically baseball size, and they were just jagged and did considerable damage. So when I see what's going on, I get a bit nervous with specifically the wind and the hailstorm. So with CL 1%, I'd rather err towards conservative by nature.
Does anybody else have any questions for Gabe? Then I am looking for approval on the proposed insurance, which would be going with EMC with a 20% increase whole.
Can I ask a question? With our budget for this upcoming fiscal year, what did we budget for insurance in terms of insurance increase?
10%. So it's about 20,000 more than we got.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to go with EMC as recommended.
I'll second it.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0.
That's good.
Thank you, Gabe.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'll get those lost runs over to Brian then.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gabe.
Next up on our agenda is the consent agenda. Does anyone need anything pulled from the consent agenda and placed later in the agenda for further discussion?
I do have a question. I was looking at the North Pine News and we had the, May school board minutes posted in the newspaper. And I saw under the J Crew that I either made the motion or seconded the motion, but voted against it. I never seconded the motion for J Crew in May. I didn't vote against that.
I'll check our minutes to make sure that's what is noted.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Then I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
There's a motion and excuse me, there's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
I
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next up is the bills. If you have any questions on the bills, please state the page number and the bill number. Are there any questions on the bills? If there are no questions on the bills, I am looking for a motion to approve paying the bills. There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next up is superintendent's report.
First thing, I just want to highlight number 2, on July 24th, we are hosting again, that Pine County Leadership Meeting, just like we did last July. That's open for any and all school board members. I will remind you again as we go through the weeks ahead, but just know that I haven't seen an agenda yet to see what the topics are, but that is hosted here, probably in our media center again, if the media center summer upgrades are finished. If not, we'll find a different location, but we have a little bit of remodeling going on up there with some cabinetry and things like that with the computer labs. So I'll keep you updated exactly what room that's in, but July 24th at 6 p.m. we'll be here.
Can that be in the community room?
Probably. That would be easier, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just put it in the community
Easier
ed room. Yep, I'll put it in the community ed rooms because the library is a little bit under construction. Then I just wanted to update you. You've seen this most Julys, just kind of what our concurrent enrollment numbers were. I know Ms. Hinckley took some questions on this. These numbers are for this past school year where our high school students had access to 28 college classes, 76 students, and you can see the breakdown of what that looked like. Took at least one of the class. So 300 sections of college classes were completed. And then I know that's a huge benefit that we're able to have that in our high school to help kids who are moving on to post-secondary education keep costs down and get a lot of those credits done. We has typically work with Pine Tech, the University of Minnesota Lake Superior College, but I know Mrs. Hartle in case by case will work with kids in other community colleges, but those are the 3 biggest ones that we work with. And you can see how that compares to the previous 3 school years. It's pretty consistent. We're in the mid 70s to around 80 kids that take those classes. So I'm glad kids continue to do that. The next one, you can just see where our attendance is as kids, not the number of kids, but what their attendance in school is. And we were at about 90% again, a little bit down from last year. The goal is to see 90%. I don't like saying goal because even if you miss 10% of the school year, that's 18 or 17 days. So that's still a lot of the school year. So we want to continue to see that number go up. I'm glad it's not in the 80s like it was a few years ago, but even if kids are missing 10% of the school year, that's about 100 or 17 days. So we'll continue to work with that and work with the county to help improve our attendance rate. And then the last item I had, since Mr. Lattimore doesn't officially start until August, and I'll get back to Mr. Lattimore in a second here. Ms. Henke and Mrs. Vikstrom had asked me to add an addition to subject matters. We have been doing an Ojibwe culture independent study class in the past, but it's not in our subject matters handbook. So as we want to make sure our subject matters reflects the classes that we have. You can see the link for the details that I included. We're always looking for some additional social studies electives, as we don't have many and the kids have to take 4 years of social studies. So this helps fulfill the requirement for kids who either can't take Ojibwe because the class fills. Typically that class fills every year, or there might be a conflict in the master schedule where they want to take Ojibwe and another class and they both only happen that 1 hour. So this provides that, and the Rosetta Stone online curriculum is easily monitored by the advisors. So looking for approval to add that in to our subject matters. That just wasn't included when we did it last fall.
I'll make that motion.
Well, Mike, I just had a quick question. So in Brian's thing here, it says it's open to juniors and seniors, but if you look at the link, it says the class is open to students in grades 9 through 12. And since it's limited to only 5.
I believe it was
that it would be
junior.
just juniors and
I believe
seniors.
it was juniors and seniors. I can double check tomorrow, but I believe that's what I was told.
Okay.
Is that it's for juniors and seniors. If it's different, I can let the board know.
So, we have a motion.
I'll second that.
There is a second. Is there any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion passes 7-0.
The last thing I'd like to, before possibly any questions, is just welcome our new high school principal, Mr. Lattimore. He didn't have to be here tonight, doesn't have a report tonight, but wanted to come and just introduce himself to the school board. We're excited that Joe has agreed to be our next principal, and I think he's going to do great things. So just wanted to introduce you all to Joe and welcome Joe to our school board meetings.
Thank you.
To our school district.
Thank you. Looking forward to it. Thank you very much for the opportunity. So, looking forward to working with you guys.
Any questions that you guys have for me on anything in this report?
All right, next up is our daycare decision.
Okay, this a little bit bigger. Anna Reiser's here, which I think you all can see, so she can help me with some of these details and possibly answer school board questions. I had met with Anna and Leslie Sauter last week. We met virtually to go over some of the specifics of the grant that Pine County applied for and how it would impact potentially starting a daycare center at Finlayson Elementary. You can see Pine County applied for $500,000 for 3 sites, one in Finlayson, one in Hinckley, and not 100% sure where the third one is, but
At Pine Tech.
At Pine Tech. And you can see the breakdown of what that grant would cover at the Finlayson site. The money for equipment, supplies, contractual, other. Also in the grant that Pine County applied for, it's noted that the Finlayson Geezy Lions have donated, or said they donate $10,000 to help with this project. We have gone through that as a board. We know that that has been promised to us. The grant money, the biggest part, I guess, when I first saw it, is that it does not cover salaries of staff for the first year. There is a possibility, and I know Anna might go into a little bit more details, that there could be some more money from the other sites, as there's still work being done on the Hinckley site specifically. When I had typed this last week, the kind of thought Anna, Leslie, and I had thought about is some of that money maybe could help cover 1 or 2 more months worth of salaries. Maybe that's a little bit different. I then just kind of broke down salaries with benefits for up to 3 staff. I don't know that we would need 3 staff full-time, but I put 3 full-time staff in, and I don't know if we're gonna call the first person a coordinator or a director. I just kind of picked the names. And these other 2 positions, the reason I put para is just, that was the salary range I chose, whether we call them a para or something different. I did factor all 3 positions to be full-time. I don't know that we would need that. The low number is the low salary range in that range, and the high number is the highest salary or hourly rate in that area of the support staff handbook. And then the low end included single benefits, the high end included family benefits. So that's where you kind of see the discrepancy in that range of salaries, not knowing if someone would take family, single. We just kind of picked what would be the possible cheapest to possible most expensive, so you could see a range. Talking with Ann a little bit today, maybe we wouldn't need 3 full-time positions. But I just did that knowing that we had talked roughly that we potentially want to be open from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., wanting to give staff bathroom and lunch breaks and things like that. There might be a little overlap. I know that could be worked out a little bit. I just wanted to aim high instead of under predicting what potential salary costs would be. I don't know if Anna, you want to go into more details, kind of the breakdown of the dollars or any more information you want to share. I guess I'll end with at least last week. Anna and Leslie kind of had hoped the school board could make a decision sooner than later. When we talked last week, we had talked obviously about let's do that at this meeting. So that way, not only for our taxpayers, our constituents, for the board, that we could make a decision one way or the other, but also for Pine County, so we could make a decision, so they know what to do as far as the grant's concerned.
Excellent.
Now I'll kind of stop talking,
Yeah.
let you take over.
Yeah, okay, so I guess, thanks for having me back, and I commend you on your continued search for, solutions for our childcare deficit in the area. I'd like to start with the grant. I know there were some questions about the grant and how the funds were allocated. So initially, we applied for $600,000 for 3 sites, so at Pine Tech, the Hinckley site, which I'll give you a little update on, Dave was sharing already a little bit, and then the Finlayson site. The state awarded $500,000, and so we had to make some quick decisions how to reallocate those funds. And really the way we did that is we looked at like who is where in their commitment phase and who had already established the grant match possibilities, that it's a 50% grant match requirement. And so Pine Tech is well on their way to having their site moved and doing the construction and everything. And they had all the grant match in place. And so we left their funding pretty close to the initial application. For the Hinckley site, at the time, we were under the impression that they were well through like getting into the bidding process. We had looked at architectural drawings for layout and construction, and they were supposed to be under construction as per the drawings this summer. And so we would be looking at developing that program sooner. So they got a little bit higher priority on that. And then with the Finlayson site, since we hadn't really made a firm decision, or a decision, I should say, we factored in, we thought there may be more time to identify some funding to support that project. And so that's where the decisions were made. None of the projects included funding for a year of salaries. So just so you know that, none of the projects were getting that. We did shoot for 3 months of salaries for each site. And then had to pull back a little bit on the salaries for all 3 sites. So that's how we made the decision. For Finlayson, we looked at like the bare essentials that were required by licensing. And that's how we came up with that. Because initially the ask was, and doesn't your computer go to sleep the minute you need to look at it? The initial ask was for Finlayson was $81,269. So that was the initial ask, and then we like cut down to really those bare essentials. And I have a spreadsheet here that I think I shared with Brian already. So if anyone's interested in seeing like the comparison of where we initially budgeted for that site to kind of like the big slashes, I will tell you when we did the initial request budget, we were hopeful that we would have the second classroom available. And then when we did the updated budget, it was just for supporting the toddler 1 classroom only. And so that's why it seems so significant, because we went from 2 classrooms to 1 as well. What else about the grant? So before I keep rattling, questions, clarifications on how decisions were made about the grant before I give you an update on the Hinckley site.
Can we compare Finlayson money to say Pine Tech? You talked about construction, some of the grant money going towards construction.
They're under construction for that nursing home building, and they're creating a space for the daycare. So we're not funding the construction there. That's part of their match for the grant funds, which is really geared towards program setup. And I really didn't do a lot of the planning for the Pine Tech side. I focused on the Hinckley and Finlayson site, because Pine Tech had like a whole giant team supporting them.
So I'm not clear, they provide some money and this grant provides some money.
Yep.
It matches it.
Mhm.
Okay, so their budget is including in what? Not building, just in what? Teachers and equipment?
So primarily for theirs was equipment, and I mean, I can pull it up because I didn't review all of the ins and outs of the Pine Tech side. And so if you want to, I think I can get that up quickly, but I think it's in my other drive.
I'm trying to get to the bottom of why they get so much more of the grant than Finlayson.
Their capacity is greater. Finlayson has the least, like the lowest capacity. So that was also factored in there. So they are serving a greater number of children at that site.
Essentially, yeah.
And Hinckley would have been the largest addition of slots for Pine County. So what they're doing in Pine, they're not adding as many as we would have been adding in Hinckley. And then Finlayson is like quite a bit lower than what would have been added in Hinckley, and lesser than Pine. I think they got more, and I didn't make those decisions. I just advocated for the sites in Hinckley and Finlayson for what I thought would get those programs up and running. But I think because they had the grant match established, and they were so far along in the process, they got some priority points when it came to allocating. And when I say priority points, there wasn't an official process, but when they allocated funds, they based those off from like where they were at in the stage of planning, how many resources had been allocated, and so forth.
Is it so much per potential infant or client, let's say?
Somewhat, but we didn't establish like a certain amount. But if we could see the overall cost of their project was significantly higher than the other two projects. So it helped them allocate some funds.
I mean, here's what I'm saying. You have 2 rooms in Finlayson without any remodeling, no bathroom remodeling, we all toured that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so much less has to be spent on Finlayson to get it up and rolling. Correct? Because there's no building remodeling, there's none of that. These other people have it. So since they're doing, do they get more funds because they have more work to do? Or just because they're farther along in the decision?
I think it's a little of both. In fact, I know that Leslie had advocated for these sites to get a little bit more so that Pine Tech would scale back their budget even further. Because like if you look at the initial budget for Finlayson, the initial overall budget for Finlayson, let me see if my readers are going to work, was $133,600. So that's what I estimated if we would like with all the bells and whistles in those 2 classrooms. And that included 3 months of salary.
Mm-hmm.
So when I gave my numbers to the grant group that was writing, and I got to be part of the reviewing, and I got to input and describe our process and everything, I asked for we'll just say $134,000 for Finlayson. When it came to the actual application, after they prioritized things, because I got to give input, but I didn't really get to make those decisions. But I really got to give strong input. They allocated $88,000 or $81,000 to Finlayson, which was lesser than the other 2 sites. And that was largely because the overall number of children served would be significantly lower than the other 2 sites. Like at the end of the day, that's what it came down to. Pine
So
Tech,
they divided it up by the number of potential clients.
I don't think they did like a hard number based off from that. They didn't like calculate a formula. So there were a lot of factors. And I can't say exactly, I wasn't in the room to make those final decisions. But they said this is, this is kind of where we are comfortable with putting these numbers in place based off from the fund match that was already established, the construction that was already planned, and ours was, the other two sites were a little further behind in the process. And so I think that factored into
Well,
it.
behind or not, it seems, I'm reading this, that Finlayson's getting punished because they don't have any construction. I mean, so how
No,
many,
no,
much-
that wouldn't be it.
Finlayson's getting, you said 82,000, was that the number?
That's what they
81?
initially, that was in the initial request. So they're getting Finlayson's getting 29,800.
9,000.
So why
So-
can't, because they're built out already, they're ready to go, why can't that be part of our matching funds? Like the
So-
site is ready.
So technically, we did think, like creatively, we could use part of that cost and calculate a number of by square footage, what would be a match, but you don't really donate back to yourself. So like if another program was subletting from you and you were donating the space to an independent provider, then you could use that as a match. So like it
Because
wouldn't.
we're using the space,
Mhm.
we get penalized. And
No, but it's not I wouldn't say it's a
Okay,
penalty.
it's not, but we don't get any more grant money.
So how much does, so Finlayson gets 29,000, roughly speaking. Pine Tech gets how many for how many kids?
I don't know, I don't have the Pine Tech numbers. I tried to be really smart and pull it up quick, but I wasn't that quick. So I didn't wanna like keep you dangling here. I'd have to go into my other drive, because I saw that was in my other drive, because that's a shared document. So if you wanna bear with me, I can try and grab that really quick,
And might as well see
but
what you can do for the
yeah,
Hinckley site.
well, let's table just this part of the discussion and then I can follow up. How about that? Because I want to switch gears to looking forward. Because the grass is greener in the future. No. So let's talk about the Hinckley site. The Hinckley site is kind of on pause. We heard back from Wax Corporate Ventures that the estimates for the bids for everything came back so much higher than they initially anticipated with the best information they had at the time. And so they cut from the current project the coffee shop, which was a business incubator as part of the grant expectation, and then the daycare, which was also a business incubator that was part of this grant that they were receiving funding to remodel that space for, from what I understand. I wasn't in on the side of them getting funding for developing their property. And those two areas will be left a shell, I think is what was described as. So at least for the next year, they're not developing those spaces as either a daycare or a coffee shop, but like developing the other spaces they had planned. So one of the spaces they had planned was like a co-working office setup. And then there was some meeting space.
And that stuff was allowed in this grant? Or was it just for daycare? I mean, it's
So
all.
that would be completely separate, but the daycare was made possible because this grant was going to build the space out for us to use.
More than daycare? You talk about a coffee shop, that comes out of this daycare fund, or this grant?
Out of this grant, yep, so the coffee shop it was supposed to be the co-working space, which was a surprise to me, I didn't know about initially. The co-working space, a meeting space, like a conferencing type of area, the daycare and the coffee shop. So they cut the daycare and the coffee shop, and I don't wanna say cut it, but they definitely cut from this portion of the project.
Do they still get grant money for the rest of the set?
They're still using the grant money that they were funded to do the other the other things.
Doesn't that seem odd?
I guess
Daycare money now is going towards private
well,
enterprise?
it technically
coffee shops
it
and-
wasn't daycare money, it was business incubator money.
Is that what this 500,000 is, grant is?
No, this
incubator?
is daycare money.
Okay,
that's this is a different pot of money.
Are you talking about Mille Lacs Corporate Ventures
Mhm.
received separate from this?
Yes.
Just to help clarify,
Mhm.
so.
Oh,
Yep, sorry. Sorry.
Two different grants.
Yep, so they received other funding and they, as part of their project, I'm sorry, I thought you guys knew about that project. So, Mille Lacs Corporate Ventures, they offered us the opportunity to create the daycare in the space they were developing with other funds. So we weren't as part of our project on the daycare side, we were just setting up the daycare. Setting up the daycare in Hinckley, just like we were setting up the daycare in Finlayson, just like the provider at Pine Tech is setting up the daycare in Pine Tech space. So the daycare budgets themselves are for setup costs to like the provider. So as the provider, we came up with the essential setup costs. And so now that this other grant isn't going to work out for this Hinckley space, we have no space in Hinckley, at least for the next year. And I don't know if in the future that would be something that would be available, but our grant timeline runs out, right? So we're going to have 1 year once we get the grant agreement in place to utilize our funds. So that's where Brian had mentioned that we had talked about there could be a reallocation of some of those funds to the Finlayson site if you approve that as a pathway for this
so
project.
there's two players involved. Finlayson, Pine Tech. Because the Hinckley site is not coming out of this 500,000.
So there's three.
If
There's-
Finlayson gets 29,000, round it to 30, Pine Tech gets 470, 470,000.
No, there's 3 sites no matter what we do. So if Hinckley doesn't pan out, then we reallocate somewhere else in Pine County.
They
So-
wrote that into that there was 3 sites. So they have to stay with the 3 sites. I'm guessing.
So Leslie and I are gonna start.
Well, then how do
pouring
you
out
divide it up if you don't have a potential site for it?
I know, that's kind of a conundrum, isn't it? Yeah.
So if money is reallocated, would there be an option for it to go towards salaries? Or is that
A portion-
allowed in the grant?
It is allowed, yeah. So we wrote that in, and a portion, it wouldn't cover a year, no matter what we do. We couldn't cover a year with that. But I could probably get that 2 to 3 months back, that we initially had asked for. That's what I asked for initially, which is what we did for all 3 sites, was 3 months. And so I really did ask for a lot for you guys. I'm continuing to advocate, and I so appreciate the passion that you've showed for being like solution focused in our communities for help solving this childcare crisis. And so these numbers, that's just where we were at when we had to send a budget back. But we have new information, so we'll have to look at them again.
But then that doesn't answer our questions of how much we're really gonna get to make a decision tonight.
Correct. Which
And
Brian and I
if you're
talked
talking
about
just
that.
like 2 to 3 months, that's still, I bet, under $50,000 that Finlayson would get. And the other one, I mean, we use taxpayer dollars. They're not using taxpayer dollars, I'm guessing. I mean, Pine Tech is using,
I mean, that's publicly funded. It's not.
but they don't go to their taxpayers. If they
Oh, I
don't
understand
have
what
the
you're
money.
Yeah, they have they're supported by tuition.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yep.
So it could still be like several months before we even knew exactly how much Finlayson could potentially get.
We'd like to make decisions in like 2 to 3 months, like really be moving forward with projects. 2 months would be preferable. And so I'm here tonight because I didn't want to delay the process of keeping you informed. And I understand I can't provide you with all of this because this is like an evolving situation that's happening as we speak. We're not at the end of the road. We don't have all of the up-to-date information. But I can share with you, we do need to expand a certain number of childcare slots within reason, and we have planned for 3 sites. How we reallocate the funds that were split between, or not split, but allocated initially to Hinckley and Finlayson, that is amendable.
Can you tell us how much Hinckley was supposed to receive?
I went to sleep again. So initially we asked for 266,000 for Hinckley, and we were supposed to get, should be here somewhere. I have to open up a sheet. Then we have the amended amount. There's so many spreadsheets.
So just so I understand that way, so if the original ask for the Hinckley site was 266,000, and if it went out at Mille Lacs Corporate Ventures, they would have had to match the 266,000.
Right.
Okay.
We weren't funded the 266,000 though, but yes.
Right, that was
would have had to do
originally,
the
okay, what were you funded then?
That doesn't look right. I don't want to give you misinformation. I didn't confirm this number with Leslie because she ultimately has the grant agreement sent back. And I don't want to give you information. I'm going to give you a number, but it sounds wrong to me because it says this is the reduced to essentials, which would have been proposing back to set up 4 classrooms in Hinckley, 214,000. But that has salaries in it, so I think you'd have to pull out like 60,000 from that. And I do apologize because I didn't confirm that number with Leslie because I was focused on the needs for Finlayson for today.
Okay.
And she ultimately is the grant manager.
Did Mille Lacs Corporate Ventures give a reason as to why they lost interest in opening a daycare in Hinckley?
They said it was a really difficult decision. They didn't, I didn't ask them to justify, which is, I would be very curious to know as well how they, how that difficult decision was made to remove those other 2 programs. Because from what I understand, what's remaining then is a co-working space and a conference space. But I could be wrong because they may have adjusted since then what their priorities were. Beth's response to me was just very apologetic. And she said it was a very difficult decision and she'd hoped that that was something they could revisit in about a year. And so it wasn't like forever. But in the meantime, like we'd like to continue to move forward with both of these sites because we've identified that the Hinckley and Finlayson communities are in great need. So for me, it's really difficult. I think that it would be really ideal to have a strong site option in Hinckley and to develop that. If you were to really say, like, if I were to invest my own money, I would look for a site in Hinckley. For Finlayson, I think that I really tried to drill down and get down to these minimum costs. But like you said, there's going to be some investment up front. With that being said, I just ran some kind of rough numbers based off from the 1 classroom enrollment and running kind of at minimum staff, based off from the salaries that Brian had identified. And I know because we've talked about if we wanted to look at like a break-even point for 1 classroom, so the toddler classroom, that's the band room or the music room that we've really focused in on, like that's our first priority room, right? At typically 80% enrollment is where we say you're kind of running at a good place. 100% enrollment just really isn't attainable at all times. You know, it ebbs and flows. So I just looked at that. If we set the rate based off from like the childcare reimbursement rate, no differential would be $170 per week per student. A 15% quality differential is $240, so significantly better, which then you have to go through the parent aware rating to get to that, but they're really great at helping programs through that. So that would be a recommendation for any program. I would recommend that. And then it's $250 if you get the 25% differential. So at that,
How many students?
this is 14 students, but
14 students.
80% enrollment, so 14 slots.
That's it, is 14 matches 80%, or 80% of 14?
10% of 14. This is my understanding.
What is that?
Yep, 80% of 14.
What is it?
80%
11?
of 14.
11-ish. 11.
Yeah, I just ran it, I ran the revenue, the 100% revenue, and then applied
11
80%.
students at $250 is how much?
How about I give you the math that I did do? So, 14 slots at $250, 100% enrolled would be $178,500. That's for 51 weeks because typically in childcare, they get a week of vacation. It could be greater, it could be less than, but that's just kind of, yep.
Is that 3 employees?
So this is just the revenue.
This is the
The
revenue.
revenue.
So at 80% of 178,500 would be 142,800. So our revenue at the highest rate would be 142,800. Keep that number. At staffing for a director and then 1.5 staff. So we're saying 1.5 staff. You're at 148,500. Okay. If we ran bare minimum staff and we're super creative with scheduling, we could get you down to 2 staff, which is, I mean, it's possible. Because you could, do a little bit part-time person in the beginning, part-time in the end, someone in the middle. But, it runs a little slower in the morning, so you're not going to have 14 there right away, and you're not going to have 14 there at the end of the day. So it kind of shortens your day where you need 2 staff. We've got you at $121,000. So for 14 students with 2 staff, $121,000 would be kind of your minimum staffing cost. Your more comfortable staffing cost, which would be at 2.5 FTE then, would be 148.5, and your break even or your revenue at 80% of 14 students for the year would be 142,800.
At 80%.
At 80%. So it's 178,500. So if we had super strong enrollment for the entire year, we've got some wiggle room to cover the other costs because we've only covered staff. There's a lot of grants for existing programs. So you've got some decent numbers. I'm going to just give you a quick comparable because I know we're down to just the 1 classroom. But if we had growth in the future, if we had 2 classrooms, so that's 14 toddlers and 10 preschoolers, because the other classroom is a little smaller square footage wise, and you need that minimum square footage. You could have some wiggle room, maybe have 12 or so, but if we just did 14 and 10, and we did those at their rates of 250, which is a 25% quality differential for toddlers, and then $235 is the 25% quality differential for preschoolers. Your revenue comes in between the two, $238,680, and your staffing, your low level staffing, bare bones operations, 203,500, and your high end of staffing, 231,000. So each of those scenarios, you're technically in the black, but you haven't covered any of the other expenses like paper towels, right? Or diapers and all those things that come along with it. So the numbers are pretty strong, but you'll definitely need supplemental income or revenues, whether that's grant, fundraising efforts, whatever. You'll need supplemental revenues to operate in the black. I mean, that's where we want to be, but
how do you figure that? Covering the salaries and then some. The school's already there, the heat and lights are already there.
It's the
What
day-to-day
supplementary
cost.
things are you talking about?
Well, food, replenishables, like all of the art supplies, broken toys. I mean, it's pretty significant what they go through on a daily basis for, I mean, it just costs more to provide childcare than it does for like probably a seventh grader in their classroom. It just, there's a lot of need. They're there for 10 hours, 8-10 hours. So there's a lot of replenishable needs on the daily that you're using. The parents will supply a reasonable amount. You get lots of donations. People want to clear out their closets. They give you your old toys. So some of those things will just come through naturally, but you do need to be prepared because again, ebbs and flows. You know, money gets tight for a lot of people around Christmas time, but for a lot of people around Christmas time, they're generous. So you don't know how your programs would respond.
I have a question that number for 230, you said that was for the 2 classrooms?
238,680, yep.
And that's with bare bones teacher. The bare bones teachers is 203,000, was it, for that
Yep.
expense?
Mm-hmm. So that would be a director, 2 full-time childcare staff for like teaching, assistant teaching, and then 1 like half-time. So that's 1, 2, 3.5 times, but at different levels.
What would be a realistic, let's say not bare bones, but just more of a normalized, realistic staffing?
I would say the 231.
231?
231, mm-hmm.
And what does that come in the salary range on more the high end
Low
or
end.
low end?
It's the low end of the salary proposed. So, yeah.
Is it difficult to find providers to come in and do these jobs?
It is a challenge anywhere. I mean, childcare isn't traditionally like a high-paying job, but I will tell you, the ranges that we are proposing here are very, for childcare, they would be a pretty generous salary. It would be attractive, good benefits, better benefits than most like daycare centers are going to pay you, and that's where childcare is really going to be at. So for our area, I would say that it would be a very attractive point of employment in our communities. I think that people who are passionate about early childcare and teaching and taking care of littles, I think it would be a very attractive job. And I mean, if you happen to cross the right person who lives in the Hinckley-Finlayson area in Asco, you know, where they don't have to commute for a well-paying job, I think this could be a really great opportunity for the right people and maybe even attract some people to the area. I know that's a big one, but yeah.
How'd you get $250
Where are we at?
per child per week?
I based that off from the Pine County reimbursement rate. So the state,
Reimbursement rate from who? I mean,
from the state. So the state
so in
said,
other words, that would, they would reimburse the family for that amount?
yes. So
Because I know it's way higher than
what the daycare rates should be.
what they are.
Oh, well, in this area, they're pretty close to sticking around that, and they can be higher. But I mean, really, I'll tell you,
What age group were you? What age group was this?
the 250 was for toddlers. So, and let's see, Pori Kids Care for toddlers was 210 last I checked. Pine, so I think that's Pine Tech and not Pine Children. For toddlers was 190. In Cloquet at their site, it was 225. So I'd say it's even on the high end of what we have, what we're seeing. That's a nice triangulation of our areas. But
You talk about the reimbursement. How much does it actually cost? What reimbursement, is that when the government pays the family a subsidy for daycare?
mhm,
But that doesn't pay it in full.
correct.
Okay, so what is it in full cost, so we can compare?
Sure. So I
Because I mean,
created.
if we're gonna charge,
Mhm.
we're not gonna charge just what the government is giving these families.
Actually, it's a really great guideline to start where you should
So the
be
daycare
charging.
is free for them,
A lot of times it is,
yeah?
and
But
that's really
what is
wonderful
the
for working
actual
families.
rate?
So the actual childcare reimbursement rate is lower, lesser than what I set it at, and I can give you those. And then I went a little higher.
I mean, what are these places actually charging?
They're charging less than the $250 day.
Yeah.
They're all charging less than the $250 in this area. So, I mean, I just gave you 3 comps in our area, and they're all lesser. Well, yeah, they're all less. So,
Get back to you on that.
okay. Yep. Yeah, you have those conversations in those meetings. I mean, it's a tough world right now. And these are families that count on some assistance to keep them employed. Not everyone is that fortunate. But, you know, I had a really, really great conversation. And if, you know, this person would be willing to come down and speak with you if you want some more information. But her name is Darla, and she works at the Cloquet site. Cloquet Schools has multiple sites, and she just gave me tons of encouraging feedback. And she also was very honest that it's tough sometimes, and that sometimes the school gets the program through, and then it, you know, comes back around again. And so they're not making lots of money in daycare in Cloquet either, but they have accepted that they are providing an essential service for their communities, for their students. When you talk about putting kids in quality daycare at a young age, you are starting their education off right. And it prepares them for your classrooms. It prepares them for preschool. It prepares them for kindergarten. I mean, you're hearing more and more that our kids are coming in and they didn't get to spend a lot of time learning their ABCs, and they're still struggling with potty training, and they're a little bit further behind because we still have this lag from recovering from COVID. And so there's just a lot of reasons why really high quality childcare sets families and communities up for more success.
Yeah, I think that's where you hit it. Like, we're gaining, if this goes through, 24 children into our school district from 17 months on up. Chances are pretty good from your past experience that kids are going to stay where they are.
I think families are, I think that's a goal for a lot of families.
Right.
Is to raise their children in the community. Now, it doesn't, a lot of families also become transient, whether they follow enrollment or whether they move to see family.
And that's
so, but it for those families that are staying in the area, it prepares them to be better little humans, better students. They already know how to come in and out of a classroom, and they're 18 months old, and they're toddling in and they're toddling out, and they know to hang up their backpacks, and they're already in a routine. And so you see there's a lot of benefits to like preparing those little minds and just exposing them to early education opportunities.
I agree with you. I've got some grandkids and it's just amazing. I mean, I'm overwhelmed by what they know and do and consistent behavior and things like that. And they enjoy going to daycare because it's such a good structure for them. Yep. And Angela's point, that would definitely be a very strong argument for saying we can get more students in Finlayson.
I think that it would be appealing for people. I mean, we've talked about this so many times. We know people are going to drive to Finlayson because they don't have other options for childcare. It's going to expose new families to the area, and they might just really love the vibe of Finlayson, right? They might love that one-on-one attention that their students are seeking, and that might be an added benefit for a lot of families. For others, they might just use the daycare services and they want to be back in Hinckley, or maybe they're actually at a different in a different community altogether, and they're just moving through the area because it's a great halfway point between one employer and another, or halfway home, whatever that might be or whatever that looks like. And so that's an interesting dynamic that Finlayson specifically, I think, could offer. You know, we looked at kind of some of the major highways going through the area. So there's lots of variables. I know I've said this before. If possible, I would recommend developing 2 classrooms, but you can see the math just works with one. It really does, but you'd have to really be mindful of staffing based off of enrollment. And so I wouldn't recommend that you promise 2.5 people jobs until you have, 7 kids enrolled, and then we know. So you would really have to make sure that before you get to that point where you're hiring, you have enrollment. That would be my caution, because you don't want to incur a lot, before you add, I'd say maybe the 2 people, and then you'd add those additional hours on top of that when the time comes that you need additional staff.
So that 238,600 of revenue figure for 2 classrooms, is that at 80% capacity?
Yep. So it was actually 14 students at 250, it was 178,500, so 142,800. And then 10 students at 235 was 119,850, 80% was 95,880, and that's the sum of 238,680.
I think I've asked this before because I'm a little confused if we have toddlers and we only run pre-K 3-year-olds 1 day a week, where there's no daycare for those 3-year-olds. They're gonna leave.
So I think that's why we proposed the second classroom for pre-K, or the option to utilize the pre-K areas outside of the ECFE or structured preschool time.
Okay, so that is the second classroom.
So ideally, you would be able
So
to.
there's an age gap there. Am I correct? We only offer a 3-year-old program 1 day a week.
At Finlayson, 1 day a week.
So
So we were proposing setting up another classroom. I don't think you made it to that visit, but we were proposing setting up another classroom. So where currently I think it is ECFE programming, so just down the hall, setting up that classroom for pre-K childcare.
okay. But then where's that class gonna go currently?
We have to,
They're in
Mr.
kindergarten
Kelly.
right now.
they're with kindergarten, we might have to shift them. We have that one big classroom at the end of the hallway that we could turn into 2 classrooms.
So if we did have 2 classrooms, we would have to put up a wall in the old big room on the west side.
Yeah, right now it's just a foldable, I don't even know if it's foldable, it's on wheel partition.
And that's what it was when I was in school, it was just a folding accordion wall, it wasn't a
There might be different,
requirement.
requirements.
You shifted everybody down.
I know what you're-
Jason's in the
I know
room.
what you're saying, I'm just saying, if
And
we're
he
going
could
back to
be
2
in-
classrooms, there's not 2 classrooms right now up there.
And I think
We
that's,
would have to do something to
Yes.
that big room on the end.
Correct.
and that we've acknowledged that, which is why we kind of backed off to just the one.
Okay.
With maybe the hopes of growing, maybe with the hopes of identifying additional funds. But I wanted you to just have some basic numbers.
I'm just still concerned about the 3-year-olds. Because
The 3, 4, and 5-year-olds.
well, we keep them at toddler, or if we have a daycare for toddler age, we have 1 day a week. We don't have that many kids in there. What is enrolled for this coming year?
Upcoming year, I don't think we have any 3-year-olds enrolled yet. However, history will show most of that
July.
enrollment comes in August, but
And then 4-year-old, we're gonna have,
3 or 4 are on the books.
no,
right?
but I mean, how many days a week?
Oh, we're
It's
5
5
days this year.
Okay, they
for
must-
4-year-olds.
So we have 5 day a week for 4-year-olds. We still have that break if we don't do 2 classrooms. Those kids, they're gonna leave. They're not gonna
They're
come
going
to
to ECFE.
Finlayson.
So the music room would be toddlers, the ECFE room would be the pre-K
So then you would have to run 2 classrooms.
For daycare.
For day.
or daycare.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
But
But the
this
ECFE
grant is only for 1, so what the numbers are, that's only showing for 1 classroom.
Correct.
Not
Because
2, so
we
there
could
could
only
be more
confirm
funding.
that we were more flexible with the one. But we have the opportunity to reallocate funds, and we have that opportunity right now. And there's not a hard timeline on this, but what I'm telling you is we are going to actively start seeking other site options since Hinckley changed. And I would love for you to get in on like first dibs, really, at the end of the day. Your project would be approved and moving forward, and I could be very comfortable, and Leslie is comfortable as well, supporting this, and reallocating those funds since we now have that opportunity has opened up to us again.
So you're saying if we have a concrete plan, there's a chance we're gonna get more money out of this grant?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, and there's a healthy amount available.
Mhm.
You know, it's not everything we need, but there's a healthy amount available that could really help offset those costs. But there still will be an investment on behalf of the district, or efforts on behalf of the district to do additional fundraising. And the clock is going to start as soon as we get our agreement back from the state, 1 year. So the work needs to be completed in that time frame. That's why I'm saying we do need to make decisions if you want to secure this funding.
By next month, you mean, or?
In the next month would be really ideal. I know we talked about like by September at the latest, but we're visiting another site in 2 weeks. That was the first time we get.
Where is that site at?
I'm not exactly sure. Leslie just called me this afternoon.
What community?
It's in.
Okay.
Yeah, our target is still Hinckley and Finlayson. That's our first choice. Is Hinckley and Finlayson. We want to pursue the plan that we originally proposed for this. And I mean, you know, I've been doing this for how long now? I just keep coming back. I don't really have any skin in the game.
Original plan was for 2 classrooms so that the 3-year-olds had somewhere to go.
That's what we proposed initially. Yep. Yep. And I think that there were concerns about shifting everyone and being able to best serve the students we already have. So we didn't want to take away from one student group to serve a new population. That was a reasonable concern to express and for our educators to really continue to advocate for what's best for all of our students while looking at how we can be creatively addressing this real need in our community. So it's a really tough call for you guys. I think that I would love to see it move forward. I really would. I just don't want it to overpromise that you're going to be making money. No, you're going to be just like everything else you do. You're going to be figuring out how to just do all the things you need to do. And I know you're really good at that, right? Your school is just, continuing to demonstrate that you're really good at allocating resources. And I always tell people, like, my dream would be for them to fully fund public schools. Like, wouldn't that be your dream? But no. I worked in a school district now for 2 years. I've mostly worked in the private sector before. And then I worked at like Anoka Ramsey, Anoka Tech, and got to see that side of like working for the state. So there's a lot of red tape there. And then I came to a school district and I was like, wow, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. But in my day job, what I do is I look for funding opportunities for our district, and we've had some great success this year. I think that this grant is just one inkling of the opportunities that are going to be out there. Your opportunities open up once you have a grant application or a licensing application in place and you have committed to a daycare center. There are more funding opportunities out there for programs that are starting up, but you have to be at that point. And so I know that there will be additional funds that are going to come forth, that are actually there that you can apply for. But until you make the decision to move forward and accept the funding and request additional, we can't move forward. We've got to make that decision. And if you're not ready to make that decision tonight, I totally get it, because I have a lot of ifs since all of this is new changing information, like in the next month, it'd be super great. And I think that's where Leslie would like to see it too. If we can make a decision in the next month, if you're ready to make a decision tonight, that's super cool. Whichever way. I feel like we have so much information that I've thrown at you, and there's just a couple of
changed
things.
so rapidly.
It did change. It did change, and that's where it gets challenging. But it does open up an opportunity for Finlayson to just kind of say, we call dibs, and we're a little further along in the process. That gets you those priority points, and we shift the money around. And those are hypothetical priority points and grant language. That's what we talk about. But with an informal process. That's really how they allocate the funds.
And you're saying there is more grant, not this grant, but other grants?
There are other grants out there.
Once we make the commitment, just
Mm-hmm.
What
Yep.
do some of the other grants?
A lot of, usually it's like a lot of equipment. And so if you want to expand your playground, if you need more classroom equipment because your toddlers have gone around the circle enough times that they need something new to keep them distracted, or you don't make a circle for preschool. Never make a circle.
So if we did get a grant, is it a different other than this?
It would be different.
Could this money be used for salaries and we put a grant for equipment, the 6,000 and supplies, so 20,000?
I'm gonna say yes because it's within the parameters of the grant. I would want to just verify with Leslie that that's, that would be, because we'd have to submit a new budget to the state. So, but the salaries are definitely within the scope of the grant. So that's the best answer I can give you today. So it's like a probably, but I wouldn't want to make promises without confirming that. And the other thing I'd like to mention is the equipment and supplies and some of those things, that's paying like 100% retail price. I know you've said you've had some things that perhaps could be utilized by the programming. I don't know if you have old computers that could be reallocated to the programming and to shift some of those dollars amounts around. You most likely have the creative curriculum in your preschool classrooms that could, depending on the licensing, be shared. And so your district probably is in a good position to already have some of these things in place that would shift some of those funding availabilities to perhaps salaries as well.
What did we say the original startup cost would be for equipment?
The original, was that the 88,000 number? Or like if we had everything in our dream number?
Or are you asking, is what we
No, what we
awarded from the grant, would that cover all of what we need for supplies, or would that only cover some of what we need for equipment, supplies?
What is not covered by the 29,000 that would have to come out of district funds for startup?
So there's a laundry list, and I can share that with you.
I don't know.
What was the question?
I guess I don't remember the amount, but I remember there being an amount you had brought to us for startup costs.
So there was 81,269, which was like essentials for startup.
No, this was before the grant. I thought you had came to us with.
Back in
We really
February.
broke down like how many cots we needed and how many.
So for supplies and materials based
for
on
startup.
licensing.
Yeah.
30-something.
I was thinking 40, but I just want to know how much would not be covered.
Let's look at, I think I can grab supplies and equipment just for toddlers, probably is what that was. So toddler supplies and equipment. Was 24,900, and then there would have been some programmatic supplies as well. So that would have been before we added the preschool back, and went back and forth there. So all right, see if all of these notes from each time I've been here.
It is my thought is there's a lot of numbers being
I know.
thrown out that
Mm-hmm.
we should get that all more accurate and maybe wait a month.
Did it include a playground? Playground for these little
It did.
people?
Yes, it did.
It did include the playground.
Yep, but not the fence. So it was the playground, but not the fence, because I have a note that we would need to identify the funding for the fence.
Did you happen to mention anything to Gabe about insurance? So I'm assuming insurance would maybe increase.
Possible.
Yeah, so it would per student, typically from like other comps that we've had, about $35 per pupil per year. And so some of that was actually addressed in our funding, I believe. I feel like I should buy you guys dinner at this time. Who did this? I know for sure in the 88,000 that was included, the additional cost for insurance, like an independent insurance policy. So, with your district, they might give you a different rate. It might be lesser, it might be greater. That's really hard to say, but just based off of independent, like a center only, because we've also explored if this was going to be operated by an independent provider. And we moved on from that because we all decided that district operated programming would be preferable based off of all of the factors, but security being probably one of the number one factors.
Has there ever been a district that you know of that stopped doing it financially, didn't work out?
I think that's happened. I feel like Malacca maybe. Did that happen in Malacca? I've talked to so many districts now, but yeah, I mean, I guess I've focused on trying to identify the districts that are like in their area doing it. Most of them aren't doing like a full childcare. Well, I think Mora is just before and after too. Yeah, I'd say, I mean, safe to say, I'm pretty sure it's Malacca that I had a conversation with. If they don't do that anymore, they just do before and after. But I'm sorry, I don't have that off the top of my head.
How many districts in the state have?
It's on the licensing
Haven't
information. So there's, I mean, the information is attainable, but there could be some with independent operators, so it wouldn't be in there. And so that I did ask licensing for that before, and it wasn't like clearly readily available. But you know, if all of your district leadership meetings, that might be something you could ask someone if they have the statistics on at the kind of the state level there.
So, in the best case scenario, it says here that it would cover 1 to 2 months worth of salaries. What's the worst case? 0?
0. Mm-hmm.
So in budgeting, we should just be conservative and just assume 0?
That's what yeah. Mm-hmm.
So with the one classroom, that's 148.5 with 2.5 full-time.
For operation costs, for
Brian,
salary costs.
Do we have wiggle room in our budget for 148,500?
We would have to go into our fund balance to do that.
I know.
And
But that's if we don't have any students
Correct.
Right,
Yeah,
that would be
right.
before.
For a year.
for a year. But we wouldn't go that long without somebody in there.
Yeah, I think you'd have to make really tough decisions at that point, but I you know, that's.
If you're looking at, and you didn't have any money for 2 months, picking that number out of the air,
Yeah,
you'd probably stop doing it. And you would have 148,000 and then maybe 2 months of salary.
Mhm.
I mean, there's a limit to the risk there.
yeah,
You wouldn't open it up for a year and then say, no,
didn't work out.
great.
Yeah.
I think you'd know before that.
I think you would. I agree.
College, are they still focusing on just the toddler and the preschool age, or are they expanding?
They're expanding to school age, but they do not include infants.
So I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Brian, if we dipped into our general fund reserve, unreserved general fund balance, how much could we take while still maintaining 25% fund balance?
I'd have to run that exact number. I was just trying to remind my own brain what about a percent is, which I think if I remember back to last month, it was about 150,000 is a percent, if I remember correctly. I believe with the additions we added, we were projected to be at 25.6%. So 0.5% over 75,000 to keep it at 25% roughly.
And then plus, tonight Gabe said insurance is more expensive than we thought, so that's 20,000. We're gonna eat already there.
Yep.
So now we're down to 55,000 before we hit 25%. And we're in a inflationary predicament with our country, and concerned we're gonna have a lot of other expenses come in higher than expected. And we need to have some kind of contingency there. We're already at bare bones. To me, the decision is easy. We don't have the money for daycare. We can explore and wait another month, but I think the answer is obvious tonight.
Can I ask, if we were able to get 2 or 3 months of salaries, would you feel more comfortable? Or is it still, hard to envision? Because if I'm gonna advocate for the district, which that's what I'm here to do, is to advocate for your district and your students. I just wanna know what to ask for. And so if you came back and told me we have to have at least 6 months, I will tell them that. I will tell them that that's what it's gonna take to make a decision or, to proceed with the project. If it's a moot point, I can understand that too. Absolutely, I get it. You guys are making really tough choices here. And so I want to be as neutral as possible, with a positive spin. Like I want to continue to be a positive supporter of this project, but I also know that it's a very difficult decision. So if you told me today, well, you know what, if we could get a commitment for 4 months, we feel comfortable with that, I'll go back and advocate for 4 months of salaries. So I just,
the 29,000. So then,
in addition, yeah.
in addition, and then we would have to match that.
Yes, and so like we have the $10,000 from the Lions.
Yep.
Lions. Already. So we've started. Leslie and I discussed today how we can allocate a value to the space, because we do think that there's within some reason. And we were going to look at that and see how that fits the grant parameters, because we're trying to get creative. And so I think that in the end, the grant match, we might have to do a little bit of creative development on. If we identify another grant, I'll just tell you, once upon a time, I asked East Central Energy for help with setting up a classroom, and we received a grant for that. And so that's an opportunity that your district could apply for a grant from other local organizations, and just say we want to put up a fence in Finlayson so that we can have preschoolers and toddlers running around freely out there and not like get lost in the trees. And I think safety and security of our students, a lot of our community will be supportive over. There's just so many opportunities, but I want to know where your real questions are. Like if you were to say, I feel comfortable moving forward, kind of where that number will be.
I would feel comfortable if we could find a third-party vendor who would just take advantage of these grant funds and say, let's use Finlayson Elementary School as our place.
Yeah.
And so we're not on the hook for losses. Let somebody else take the risk.
Yeah, I can understand that. Yeah. Yeah, I don't have anyone. We've not been able to get one person, which is why I'm here. Honestly, Leslie asked me, like, I'm kind of doing her a favor by taking this on, because like I have a day job and family and all these other fun things that I can do. But I just really believe you guys are, exploring the right opportunities. We totally understand if it doesn't work. Like it really is a tough decision. I just don't know that there's a third-party vendor that's going to be in the Finlayson area. I could maybe get someone in Hinckley, I think. The market's different.
Sure.
So.
If you could get extra funding for a few months, because I think the potential that can do for the community and for Hinckley-Finlayson schools is unlimited. I certainly think that we would have to look at it if you could get us a few months of salary.
Yeah, okay.
That's my opinion.
Okay.
So does that mean then that we would open the doors for 3 months, and then if we're not in the black after 3 months, we would close the doors?
That would have to be a board decision. I would like to think that wouldn't happen, but I think it's worth the gamble. I know we're financially pressed, but I think it's worth the gamble myself.
Would you look at 1 or 2 classrooms?
I prefer 2, but
Could the funding, we find funding, you think, to split a classroom further down the line, like, not down the line.
So like if you started with one and then added in the second.
No, keep the two, but would a grant pay to put a divider up to separate a room?
We need to use those classrooms. that are
Kellish's
empty
old
now.
room, like, could we find a grant, do you think, in the next, before daycare would open, to divide those rooms up?
Renovation grants for schools are really tough. I mean, you could look for maybe local opportunities for funding that, I think would be more realistic, but I mean, I work in a school district every day and all we can do is dream about renovation funds and the state is just really tight with them. They're not coming, I mean, like, we were awarded a grant to update a couple of our restroom facilities. So when they do have facility grants, they're super specific to like what their goals are in enhancing, safety and security in our schools. And that one came out of the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. So maybe they have, they'll have something. MDE might come out with something down the line, but I think you'd probably be best looking for a local opportunity. And the county perhaps might have something at some point too, but that's going to be tough. Renovation is tough.
So then that would probably also be helpful is if we knew kind of a better idea if we did 2 classrooms, what the grant would change to.
Okay.
Because then that would
Mhm.
serve
Yep.
a max of 24 kids versus 14.
Yep. And that is absolutely a discussion that Leslie and I are prepared to have. In fact, we are motivated to have that. We want to see this project be successful. If, the sooner we can have a decision from you though, we know if we have to move on to identifying a different site. So we're really sticking it out with you guys and hoping that this works for you. But if it doesn't, we'll put in the work and find the next best solution. Again, our target communities are Hinckley and Finlayson, so we prefer to stay within Hinckley and Finlayson. If you know someone who wants to donate a building or like lease it to us really inexpensively, that's an option we're willing to pursue as well. So always think outside the box because our goal is to add childcare slots to our community.
But there's a potential of this money, if we don't use it, going outside of our district to a different community.
And
If we
there's,
don't utilize this grant, this money, this money will go somewhere within our county
within our county, yes.
and not necessarily in our district,
Correct.
if we don't use it.
Yes. Yep.
Could you also reach out to Mille Lacs Corporate Ventures and just ask them if they would be willing to tell you why they decided not to proceed with the daycare?
Yeah, and Leslie might have more information because she was gonna do a follow-up call too, so I'll check with Leslie first, and see if there was kind of some more information, other than cost, why they prioritize other things, but yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm curious as well.
In your knowledge and experience, would you say the daycare industry is a tough business?
I think it requires a lot of specialized knowledge. And so the people who are really good at it are good at it and they make a go at it for a reason, but it's not for everybody. Kind of like I'll never open a welding shop. It is specialized. It's not easy. It's not easy because not everyone thinks like educators. The reason why it's not a far cry from what the district can do is because you think like educators. You know what the goal is for caring for children. You understand data privacy. You understand safety and security for your building. You have so many things in place to set you up to be successful. You're at an advantage over any other group. But yeah, there's a reason why people are knocking on the door to take this money from us. It requires a lot of knowledge.
Profit margins typically razor thin?
The larger the program, the more likely you are to be profitable. So smaller programs have a hard time making a go at it, kind of like a small grocery store. When you buy in quantity and bulk, yeah.
So Finlayson is not attractive for a third-party vendor to come in and make a profit?
It would be tough because they'd want to serve the full family. And that's what I would tell you is anyone doing daycare would really want to serve the full family. They know there's an advantage over serving the full family and attracting people to your site if they can serve your full family. I mean, excluding child school age, because there's a lot more. There's different options once they hit school age, but for the early childhood, you know, from birth to school entry, they really would prefer one provider. And so we do know that about the industry. People don't want to make stops all over town. Drop a kid here and a kid here and a kid here. So that, I mean, that is something that would be not probably attractive to a third party.
Would you say because there's just not a whole lot of children that fit that description in Finlayson area?
Well, I think there's lesser compared to some of the other communities that we're looking at. I think that the fact that they can't serve like birth through kindergarten entry would be limiting. I know there's ways that you can subsidize the care within your school, but for providers, you know, they know that it's harder to market to families if they can't serve the full family. So yeah, that's a tough one.
So hypothetically speaking, if we got more money and just say we voted to go through with this and we can't hire anybody when is this starting? Not in 2 months. No. Are we starting this school year?
No, it wouldn't happen.
Apply for
A license takes at least 6
Still
months.
at least 6 months,
So-
6 months.
I would say you're probably looking at having things up and running, maybe starting a summer program next year. You can open in late spring, but that's not like a lot of times when people are looking to make changes to childcare.
Okay, so what happens with the grant money if we can't find 2.5 staff or we don't have the clients? What do we do then?
If you accept the funds, you spend the
Yeah.
funds, and then you pay those back. Yeah, I think so. I'm gonna verify that on the terms because I don't have the terms yet for that. And I would like to verify that. I do have an award notice, and that's might most likely be in there, but it's probably gonna be coming in the full OGAN. So,
I mean, we currently have 6 para positions open going into our school year next year. And if that's the same employee kind of status as the 2,
yeah, I think
are
that
we?
what's different about this is there's like this, you get your own classroom, you kind of have, it is a different world, so I think it's gonna
So
appeal to
maybe it
different
should
people.
say
but
teacher.
It really is an assistant teacher,
Assistant
and maybe
teacher.
a classroom aide. So it is different, but I think Brian was right to put it in the para perspective because that is the salary range. So I think that's why he used that. And that's why he said like, we would probably look at the title.
Because
Because
the job duties are not about that. Okay,
they
I
would
get
be,
it.
they would be different. And I would recommend that you would use the same verbiage as state licensing requires. So you would have a center director who could serve as a director/teacher, and you'd have an assistant teacher.
Okay.
So there's a little bit, I mean, there's a little bit different, and then they really kind of have those developed relationships. They're serving the full classroom. They take ownership in a different way that maybe sometimes parents don't have the same opportunity to do when they're moving around throughout the building. And I don't know. Yeah, hiring's tough everywhere though, right? It's a lot.
In every field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Any more questions?
So what is on the agenda is an action item. Right. With this information,
Can we make a motion to table it till Friday?
Sounds like you did.
so there's a motion to table the daycare decision until the August board meeting. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
So do a roll call. Leo,
Yes.
Janelle,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
Dave,
Yeah.
Toby,
No.
Angela,
Yeah.
Jody, yes. The motion passes 6-1 to table daycare decision till the August board meeting. And I think you have a little homework. Yeah.
Yep, and specifically, I noted that, what would the grant change to if we had 3 classrooms, so what the additional funding amount would be?
2 classes.
What did I say?
3.
I wrote 2, I promise. Ask Millex Corporate Ventures, like why they are pursuing daycare right now, why the other entities became their priority. And then, what happens if, like, after accepting the funds, we don't actually open a program or it is short-lived?
To be clear,
And then also the staffing, which is a few months of wages for staffing.
Say that one more time.
A few months of
To
wages.
get,
Oh,
to
yeah.
get some.
Oh, yeah, I'll make sure that's specific. And then well, I wrote up here 3 months salary, that must be where I started that now. Can we get 3 to 4 months? I'll do my best, to try and get you guys the best, opportunity. And then it's really up to you to make that tough call. Yeah,
to be clear.
Yep.
Let's just imagine we said yes and it's, and apply and all this and that.
Mhm.
So now our portion of this 500,000 goes up, plus other grant money is likely available because we made a decision to go yes.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep. And I'll still be available to kind of help you through that process. So that's kind of the one thing. Remember when they had those funds identified for childcare solutions, and there was like a committee. I think Brian, you were on the committee, and Millex Corporate Ventures. That's kind of where all these people came together. And so there is some funding for me to help you through that process if you decide to move forward. So what's our first step in licensing? And so, whomever you determine is the best person in your district to really be the point of contact for all of these things. I know, Brian, your name's going to be on everything. So ultimately it will be you, but I'm sure that you don't have time to write policy. So I'll be in place to work with whomever is going to be responsible for the policies and procedures and things like that. So that's the other piece.
All
All
right.
right.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
Anna.
Great night for you. Thank you.
Brian, can we check with you to see what insurance
Yeah.
would adjust to?
Yeah. I will check with him tomorrow.
Moving on to budget calendar and unfinished business.
8 days into the fiscal year, the biggest part is that we're ordering materials as the new school year is still looking at staffing, ordering our capital budget materials. And we'll begin to start monitoring enrollment very, very closely as we get into the August school board, August month, but for our August school board meetings. So biggest thing is just we're ordering and kind of monitoring those budgets that we put in place.
All right, does anybody have any questions? And no action items?
Nope.
All right, then we will move on to board reports. For board policy review, sorry. Did we skip ahead too far?
Yeah.
Oh, I always missed Jake Pride, I'm sorry. Jake Pride, are there any additions to Jake Pride? No? All right. Then we're moving on to board reports. And
Yep, and so recommending that we continue with the second Monday of the month for our school board meetings, meeting at 7 p.m., alternating between Hinckley and Finlayson. And then ultimately recommending the board report education schedule, which is the same it's been the last few years. I did make the changes just from Sarah Beckrich to Bruce Beckman, but just recommending keeping our meeting presenters, the schedule the same. And then you can see the policy reviews. The MSBA recommends that we go through all our policies within 3 years. This list would get us there. We'll have gone through everything that we have in place in the 3 years. However, MSBA came out with about 43 There's 43 policies that change minorly over the summer with the new legislative rules or regulations they've put in place. When we get to policy 208 a little bit later, I'll go further into detail, but recommend approval of our monthly meeting schedule and the people who present and our policies.
Does anybody have any questions? So I'm looking for a motion to accept board report schedule and the board policy review cycle.
I'll make a motion.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7. Next up is committees. Does anybody have any questions regarding the committees list?
I would enjoy being on the Communication, Climate, and Retention Committee.
I don't think there's anybody coming off of it. Is there?
I
I
see,
don't,
I haven't talked to Angela, but Angela, you have a full plate with 7 committees. Would you be willing to give up Communication, Climate, and Retention?
You can have ECMAC.
What's that?
You can have ECMAC. I'd like to stay on the communication.
I'm passionate about communication and retention and climate myself, so I'm not interested in it.
I think if Angela wants to stay on it, totally, and she's been on it for years, that she continues to serve on the communication and retention. Would you like ECMAC?
No, I guess my other question would be to Heather or Janelle. I know you're also the other 2 members on communication, retention, and climate. Would either of you be willing to trade for anything that I have?
I would like to stay because I have been on it since it started.
Okay,
I too agree that I would like to stay, and I was gonna actually offer anybody else needed. I don't know what ECMAC is.
ECMAC is our ITV provider. So
It's
twice a year.
It's twice a year.
It's and you can do it virtually, otherwise you drive to Graham.
Okay.
It was
Typically,
one of the
that's
first
virtual.
committees I was on.
Yeah, so I can take on more, so I could do that. Maybe. I'm getting a look from you, but I don't want to do it.
how often does the communication committee meet?
We try to go quarterly. This year, I think we met 2 or 3 times. I try to do them at least quarterly if we can. It doesn't always work perfectly that way, but so 4 times a year at most, but maybe 2 or 3.
I feel I'd bring a completely different perspective. And maybe that would be helpful to have a different viewpoint. Just throwing it out there, but if there's no openings, maybe next year.
I guess my feeling is 3 is enough on a board. We put 4 on there and then it is a quorum, so we can't do that.
I agree.
Does anybody else have any questions regarding the committee list?
So, can I ask one? Janelle, are you gonna take ECMAC? Did I hear that trade go down or? Yeah,
She just gonna take it.
Yeah, I'll take it.
no trade. You're just taking it from.
Yeah, I'll
okay.
take it, because I think Jody and Angela have a few.
And I
committees
attend
they're
that. And I attend that one with you.
on. You attend most of them, all of them?
Most of them, yes, not the city of Hinckley unless I'm invited, or city of Finlayson. The rest of them, yes, I attend. MSBA, I don't know that they've ever called one, but yes, otherwise I would attend. SCRED, I do not attend either.
You do on the superintendent.
Superintendent
your own-
meets, but I don't go to their board meetings.
Okay, so if there are no other questions on committees, I'm looking for a motion to accept the board committees.
Make the motion.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next up is fees.
I'll go through each one. Instrumental rental, recommending keeping that at 50. There's not a lot of responses to the survey. The local average is 62. I'm still recommending 50 as I think if we go too high, we might steer some people away from wanting to play an instrument. And I am not aware of any complaints of that $50. Driver ed behind the wheel, I'm recommending moving from 250 to 260. The biggest reason is just cost of gas, transportation, talking about inflation a little bit. So recommending moving up with that. You can see the local average is 272 for that. But that one's a little bit higher, just some schools combine that with classroom costs where we don't have classroom costs, part of what we do for our ninth graders. Athletic participation, recommending going up from $50 to $55. The Great River Conference average is 69. However, Mora and East Central are still at 50. They haven't had, as far as I'm aware, their July business meeting to set new fees. But again, recommending a little higher salaries, transportation, those costs are going up. Recommending similarly for the same reason, moving our non-sports activity fees from $30 to $35. Local averages is higher for that. However, I think if we go too high, we already have lower participation in some of these smaller events. I don't want to make it too expensive for families to try those other activities. Recommended keeping our combined athletic and activity fee the same at $130. That if a student does many events, that they typically will not have to pay for their spring sporting event. The local average is $300. We don't have a lot of families that get to that 130. They would have to be involved in at least 3 things to get there. And we don't have as many 3 activity families as we've had. For the hockey co-op sports, I left that the same. If you remember last year, we talked about hockey mini school board meetings, and we had left it at the end. I think we got to September last year where the district would cover the costs, excuse me, up to $2,500, but still require the athlete to pay the $50, which would now be the $55. So I'm sorry, I have that typo. If the board approves athletic fees, so if the board approves the changes, I would change that to $55. We didn't have any issues with this last year. I think it went well. It brought us in alignment with what we pay with our other sporting events. For gymnastics, we didn't have any athletes, so we don't have that cost. The girls hockey boosters still pay for them, and there was no cost for wrestling for families last year because it was under that $100,000 threshold. Lastly, after comparing to our conference schools, we are very much an average with our admission to events. So I'm leaving that the same as we have done, including for our adult pass, student pass. We would keep it free for senior citizens, 65 and older, free for school board members / admin and a guest, and then free for all other Hinckley-Finlayson staff. And then the last fee is our iPad laptop rental fee. It's rental per se. It helps with breakage, damage, recommending keeping that at $30. Again, I don't want to go too high as we're relying so much on our devices that we don't want to make it too expensive for the families when it's something we use every single day in many of our classes, especially at the high school level. And then keeping the family max at $100. It helps with that accidental damage, things like that. If a kid breaks their device, they've paid this fee. It covers that extra cost where they may have to pay another $30 fee, but they wouldn't have to pay up to $500 to pay or $300 to pay for the new device. Questions on any of that? I know that's a lot of fees, but any questions on those initial fees or costs that I proposed?
I got one, Brian, just to verify, if a student athlete cannot pay the fee, there's is HF Club or somebody?
Yep, HF Club still has a healthy balance, account balance, and we've used that. This year, I think we used it for 3 or 4 kids. I did check with Mandy. We still have funds. We would still do that if a student could not afford this.
So nobody would be
Nobody would be denied because of cost.
Beautiful.
Brian, would that be true with instrument rental if a student can't afford the instrument rental at 50?
We would work through that too, yes.
Do you know how many instruments we have?
That we
I mean,
rent.
is it, yeah. I mean,
I don't
Before,
actually.
or what's the criteria for renting it through the school? Because Music Connection, you pay that per month. So I mean, is there a reason? How do we base?
But then you
Yes.
own it at the end of the rent. It's like a rent to.
You can.
You
That's
can,
how Brooklands is.
you can.
Yeah.
But I'm just, Music Connection. I'm just wondering how we determine who gets the school rental instrument.
I would have to, I honestly don't know. I would have to check. how
I guess
that's
I'd be
determined.
curious to know
Or how
how
often.
we,
I'm not even sure how often it's used, to be honest. I think it's been at that $50 ever since I've been here.
it has been. But I was just curious how many utilize our instruments versus
I don't know that. I can certainly research that.
how we determine who gets to use.
I think it's a choice, if I remember right, of like the family or the student, with Music Connection. Newer, and yeah, they can do the rent to own thing, whereas if they rent from the student, they can't. I thought we had a choice.
Okay.
Don't quote me.
Brian, can I ask for non-sports activities? Do we have something in the budget for the fall play for next year?
All right, if there are no other questions, I'm looking for a motion to accept the fees that have been presented.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second
So motion and a second, is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next up is the mileage rate.
Recommend we continue to follow the IRS rate, which for next year is set to be at 67 cents per mile. We do encourage staff to use a district vehicle when it's available, but if we do need to reimburse, it'd be at 67 cents per mile per the IRS.
Does anybody have any questions regarding the IRS mileage rate? I'm looking for a motion to approve.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next up is our substitute teacher pay.
We've had this in place this will be, if the board approves, going on 3 years, but recommending continue to start at $155, but moving to $170 if a substitute subs 10 days. And then also recommending we start at $170 for teachers who have retired from Hinckley-Finlayson schools, but then move to $180 after 10 days. The reason a little higher for retired teachers, they've been a teacher, they know our system, they know our schools, a lot of times they know our students, and we don't have to pay into TRA. You can see the local average is $154, 30 schools reported on that, so I'm recommending we continue what we had in place for this past school year.
So our past school year, the starting was 155
The exact same, yep.
and the local average is 154, meaning neighboring school districts, so
Yep.
right in the mix.
Yep.
Did we have a hard time getting subs?
Oh, yes, every school has that. Yeah, absolutely.
Is it worth throwing it, making 160? I mean, get above that average? Or what is Plain City and East Central, or we don't know what they're at?
I don't have theirs exactly in front of me, I'd have to pull that document to know where, and they haven't had their July board meeting yet, so I don't know what they're setting theirs at yet.
Okay.
We're ahead of both of them, so it's kind of, we set it, they could go higher no matter what we set.
True.
We did come back a few years ago and set it different.
We did.
After they set
Mid-year,
theirs.
we did.
So maybe it's worth just leaving it at 155,
See
we
what
would
happens.
adjust.
So if there is no other questions, I'm looking for a motion to accept this step.
A second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. We are now to meal recommendations.
Lunch breakfast rates? Yes, still waiting, so the state has not come out with new numbers yet. We anticipate at least adult lunch going up, but they haven't released that yet. So for now, I've left it the exact same as we had, where the adult breakfast is $3, the adult lunch being $5. And then if anyone, adult or student, wants to buy a milk that isn't included in the lunch, that would be 50 cents. I could have to bring this back in August if the state comes out with new details. We looked even this morning and the state still hasn't released that, so for now, I'm recommending we keep it the same. If we get new information by the August board meeting, I would bring this back.
Does anybody have any questions regarding the meal recommendation?
Right, did you say the milk is extra for students?
If they want to purchase an extra one,
They're allowed one, right?
they get one with their meal. If they wanted to buy another one,
Yeah, okay,
I mean,
good,
high school, they'd go to a la carte, but elementary, they'd have to pay 50 cents.
okay.
And what we charge in a la carte is also 50 cents.
Okay.
So I'm looking for a motion to accept the meal recommendations as presented.
I'll move that.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next up is, employee and board member meal reimbursement.
You can see these haven't changed in a while. In doing comparisons, the daily dollar amount is pretty consistent. They may start at $8 and, where we start at $9, and they might be at $12.50 for lunch, but the daily dollar kind of averages out. So I'm not recommending any changes to our breakfast, lunch, dinner. Not heard any complaints when staff are going to conferences that this is not covering their needs. A lot of time these conferences, especially if they're staying in a hotel, they have a breakfast anyway. A lot of these conferences provide a lunch. So I feel keeping the same is appropriate this time.
Are there any questions? Not, I'm looking for a motion to accept the employee board member meal reimbursement.
Make the motion.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next up is school board compensation.
So you can see I'm not recommending any changes. I was able today to get some local averages. 9 schools did report. The average of those 9 schools per meeting is $99.63 per meeting. However, of those 9 schools, 1 school pays their board members $3,500 annually, and 1 school pays their board members $2,500 annually, so that it skewed the numbers a little bit. If you do take those 2 schools out and then look at the other 7 schools, that average for meeting pay is just over $56. Our officer pay is pretty consistent for at least chair. Clerk and treasurer were a little bit higher than our neighbors. But I'm not recommending any changes at this time to officer pay or pay for board members attending meetings.
Does anybody have any questions regarding the school board member compensation?
So Pine City, they pay 90 per meeting, and the chair said they're looking at bumping that up. And $35 per hour for all other meetings. And we have the Mora, 3,500. East Central is 60. And Brian, when was the last time board members got a raise for the regular meetings?
I only have records to my first year, which would have been or maybe the 12-13 school years, all the records I could find. It has not changed other than chair and maybe some of the officer pay, but regular meeting pay has not changed, at least since I've been here. I'd have to ask other people in the district office who've been here longer than I.
So it's at least 11 years?
They're going on, this would be the 13th where it wouldn't have changed.
I think we're long overdue to adjust those rates higher. And I would say match Pine City or go with the average and just say $100.
I hadn't heard from Pine City when I put the request out yet, but I'm not saying that that's right or wrong. I hadn't heard from their superintendent as of, I don't know if she's emailed me since, but I hadn't heard from her either.
Yeah, I did talk with James Foster today at the meeting of the chairman of their school board. He said it's $90 per meeting, $35 per hour for all other meetings. So it's per hour.
So Toby, if you want to change it, you need to make a motion
Okay.
to change it to what you want.
Sure. I'll make a motion to raise the School board member paid $100 an hour, $100 per meeting, I should say.
All right, so there's a motion to change the school board meeting pay per meeting to $100. Is there a second? We have a motion. Is there a second? So the motion fails.
I'll make a motion for $90 per meeting.
There's a motion for $90 per meeting. Is there a second?
Can I ask a question? Brian, when you say the average is 99 per meeting, is that is taking into consideration this $3,500?
And
That's annually, that's not taking into account any committee meetings or anything else? Like, they just get paid that?
They said, those two schools just said 3,500 and 2,500 per year. They didn't list out any other of these, like committee meetings or things like that, so I would read that to interpret anything that board member does.
whether you have 12 or 36.
So that's why you put that number so high, is because you're basing it on 12 meetings.
Or 36.
Correct. I just divided by 12 meetings, yeah, 'cause I don't know how
So
many.
that increased that.
Correct.
And-
Because I don't know how many committee meetings they could or could not be on.
And when you took those two schools out
Then the
and just did
average,
7 schools, the average then was 56.
correct.
And those are area schools?
I sent the email out to Region 6, which goes from here all the way out towards the St. Cloud area. Locally, I heard from East Central, Mora. I did not hear from Pine City. Sounds like Toby heard that was $90. And then I heard from schools like Malacca, PBE, Howard Lake, Waverly, Royalton, Wilmer. So Region 6, which basically starts from us and goes west to St. Cloud.
So I'm just gonna say, for me personally, I am not looking at raising it, because to me, initially when I joined the board, I was doing it as a community service. So I'm not personally looking for an increase.
It's been a long time. I wouldn't mind seeing a raise, but I think 90 is too high. I don't know if you do a friendly amendment at 70 or 75, I don't.
So right now, there's a motion on the table for $90. I'm looking for a second. So the motion fails for $90.
Only make a motion and leave it just like it is.
So there's a motion to accept the school board compensation and keep it the way it is. There is a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Okay.
Opposed?
Opposed?
So we'll do roll call. Leo,
Yes.
Janelle,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Toby,
No.
Angela,
Yeah.
Jody, yes. Motion passes 6. Next up is our official newspaper.
Recommend continuing with the North Pine County News as our official newspaper. Recommend we budgeted for about $5,000 this past school year that we just completed. We did not quite get to 5,000, but recommending staying with North Pine County News as our official newspaper.
Do we have a choice?
We do, we don't.
I'm just wondering, is there any other options?
We have to, if your town has the newspaper in it, you have to have an official newspaper. We only have one. There really isn't a choice.
Okay,
I'm looking for a
And-
motion. Oh,
sorry.
go ahead.
The Evergreen isn't,
Okay. I don't think they're considered, I know it goes to the whole community, but I don't think it's an official,
I think
But I don't
it's
think they
considered
do
something
legal.
else, but I can't think.
because they don't do the legal bids and the, like, board minutes, and when we go up for those election type things, we have to have an official newspaper.
got it, okay, thank you.
All right, so I'm looking for a motion to accept the official newspaper.
I'll make the motion.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next up are two policies that have been presented. The first one, oh, sorry.
Nope, that's, go ahead. 704, we did talk about last month. This is the policy that was recommended by our auditors. I am putting 208 on as a first read, as we need to have policy 208 to be able to do some of these policies that MSBA updated in a one meeting adoption. A year from now, we'll have to do 208 again because we don't have 208 in policy today. But going forward, having 208 would let us do some emergency one meeting adoption type policies. And the biggest reason I'd like to do that is I have a list of about 43 policies that had minor changes that MSBA and they recommend doing it as a one meeting adoption because there's not substantial changes to the policy, but just more legislative language. So I'd like to put policy 208 as one of our policies so I can work. I wouldn't do all 43 in August because that's all we would do in August, but to be able to get us through these, I don't want to call them minuscule, but these non-substantial changes, yet legal changes that we have to make to our policies, if that makes sense. So I'm recommending approval of these two policies for this one.
I'll make the motion.
So 208 is a first read.
It is a first read.
But it's allowed.
Correct.
I'll make the motion to approve both policies, 704 and 208.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? The only thing I would like is a copy of that, just outlining, because it says exactly what the change is on the policy, and that's always helpful when we're looking at the whole thing.
Yep. And then I'll work with you how we want to, because I don't think we want to do all 43 at once. But we also want to get them. I will try to pick the ones that directly impact students first and staff second, or at the same time, and then
Okay.
do the rest in September.
All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next up are the four policies that are presented.
Yeah, and it looks like a lot more in 4. As you can see, 506 has 3 different links. The first one, student discipline, that change I made, again, was just taking off Saturday school. The second link, the form, that is what the principals have to communicate home to the families with when there's discipline, and we don't necessarily send this form. We put all this into Synergy, but this is the information that the principals have to communicate with the families. And then the third link for that policy is if families want to make a complaint. So that's why that 506 has 3 links, is there's 3 different parts to that. Same with 722 for public data requests. This form is just what the community member would fill out if they wanted to make a public data request. So I just wanted to clarify that. And then the last one as a first read of staff social media policy.
Does anybody have any questions regarding the 5 first reads? All right. Next up is superintendent evaluation. I am recommending that we go to closed session. So to close the school board meeting according to Minnesota statute 13D.01 to discuss employee evaluation, superintendent annual review, as well as to discuss the district employees negotiation strategy. I am now looking for a motion to go into closed session.
I'll make the motion.
There's a motion